The hearing room fell silent as Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett adjusted her microphone. The camera zoomed in on her determined expression, her blazer perfectly pressed against the stark backdrop of the Capitol Hill committee room. Across from her sat Jeff Bezos, founder of Amazon, his bald head gleaming under the harsh lights, expression unreadable behind a practiced corporate smile. Just moments earlier, when the cameras were briefly off, Bezos had leaned forward and whispered, "Congresswoman, I suggest you reconsider your line of questioning today. Amazon employs thousands in your district. We have a long memory." The threat lingered in the air between them. But what Bezos didn't know was that Crockett had spent months preparing for this moment. Hidden in her portfolio were documents no one outside Amazon's inner circle had ever seen, internal files that would send shockwaves through Wall Street and potentially change the tech landscape forever. This wasn't just another congressional hearing, it was about to become the most explosive confrontation between corporate power and government oversight in decades. Before diving into this incredible story, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss our latest political showdowns and shocking revelations. Jeff Bezos arrived at the hearing with the confidence of a man worth over $150 billion, 0 cents. His sleek suit and calm demeanor projected the image he'd carefully cultivated. A brilliant innovator and business genius who transformed online shopping and built one of the world's most valuable companies. Behind him sat a row of high-pressed lawyers and Amazon executives, a wall of corporate power ready to defend their empire. For years, Bezos had navigated congressional hearings with practiced ease. He deflected tough questions with technical jargon, promised to look into issues that never got resolved, and charmed lawmakers with talk of job creation and American innovation. Time after time, despite concerns about monopolistic practices, worker treatment, and tax avoidance, Amazon had emerged relatively unscathed. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett presented a stark contrast. The former civil rights attorney from Texas had built her reputation fighting for the underdog. Since arriving in Congress, she had become known for her sharp questioning and refusal to accept evasive answers from powerful figures. Unlike many of her colleagues, Crockett couldn't be intimidated by corporate power or distracted by technical jargon. "Congresswoman Crockett has 5 minutes for questioning," announced the committee chair. What the cameras didn't capture was the meticulous preparation that had preceded this moment. For 6 months, Crockett's office had worked with whistleblowers from inside Amazon, former executives, data analysts, and warehouse workers who had witnessed concerning practices firsthand. Together, they had assembled a devastating dossier of internal documents, emails, and data that told a very different story than the one Amazon presented to the public. The stakes couldn't be higher. If Crockett succeeded in exposing what she'd discovered, it could lead to antitrust actions, massive fines, regulation of the tech industry, and a significant drop in Amazon's stock value. For workers and smaller businesses crushed by Amazon's practices, it could mean long overdue justice. For Bezos, it threatened his legacy and fortune. Backstage, Crockett's chief of staff handed her one final document, an email from Bezos himself that had arrived just that morning, suggesting that her continued harassment of Amazon could have unfortunate consequences for her district's economy. Rather than intimidating her, the email had only strengthened her resolve. She tucked it into her folder alongside the other evidence. "Mr. Bezos," Crockett began, her voice steady and clear, "thank you for joining us today. I'd like to start by discussing Amazon's market position and how it affects competition." Bezos nodded slightly, prepared for what he assumed would be another routine questioning he could easily navigate. He had no idea what was coming. "Mr. Bezos," Crockett continued, her tone shifting from cordial to direct, "when you last appeared before Congress, you stated under oath that Amazon does not use individual seller data to develop competing products. Is that still your testimony today?" Bezos leaned into his microphone. "Yes, Congresswoman. That's our policy. We prohibit that practice." Crockett nodded, pulling out the first document from her folder. "Then I'm curious how you explain this internal presentation from 2022 titled Seller Data Utilization Strategy, which explicitly outlines how Amazon teams can, and I quote, leverage third-party seller metrics to identify product opportunities for Amazon Basics." The document appeared on the large screen behind him. Bezos glanced back, momentarily surprised, then quickly regained his composure. Congresswoman, without seeing the full context, I can't speak to that document. But I can assure you, let me provide more context then, Crockett interrupted, pulling out another document. This email chain between your private brands team shows them discussing how they accessed detailed sales data from a small business selling premium yoga mats. 6 months later, Amazon launched its own nearly identical product at a lower price point, eventually forcing that business to close. Would you like me to read the exact language your team used? Murmurs spread across the hearing room. Bezos' lawyers leaned forward, whispering urgently. The Amazon CEO shifted slightly in his chair. Congresswoman, if such documents exist, they represent a violation of our policies. I would need to investigate. With respect, Mr. Bezos, this isn't one isolated incident, Crockett pressed. I have documentation of 17 similar cases from the past 2 years alone. But let's move on to working conditions in your fulfillment centers. Crockett displayed a different set of documents, including internal safety reports and employee complaints. This data shows injury rates at Amazon warehouses are more than double the industry average, yet internal communications show executives rejected safety improvements because they would slow down productivity. Can you explain why profit was prioritized over worker safety? The committee room grew tense. Bezos' expression hardened as he realized this wasn't going to be a standard hearing. Worker safety is a top priority at Amazon, he stated firmly. We've invested billions in safety measures and have seen significant improvements. That's not what your own internal reports show, Crockett cut in, displaying more documents. In fact, this risk management assessment from last year specifically warns that current practices are unsustainable and legally risky, but notes that addressing them would impact delivery speed guarantees to customers. As questioning continued, Bezos became visibly frustrated. His answers grew shorter, more defensive. Several times he conferred with his legal team before responding. When Crockett presented evidence of Amazon systematically identifying and then acquiring potential competitors to eliminate competition, Bezos finally pushed back. Congresswoman, you're presenting selective information without proper context. Amazon creates jobs, serves customers, and drives innovation. These accusations are simply untrue, and frankly, they're offensive to the thousands of Amazon employees who work hard every day. Crockett remained unruffled. Mr. Bezos, I'm simply presenting Amazon's own internal documents. If you find them offensive, perhaps you should reflect on your company's practices. The committee chair announced, the Congresswoman's time has expired. Bezos relaxed slightly, believing the worst was over. But Crockett had one final move. Mr. Chairman, given the nature of these documents and their public interest value, I ask for an additional 5 minutes to present evidence related to Amazon's tax strategies and consumer data practices. The chairman, seeing the significance of the moment, agreed. Without objection, the gentleman is granted an additional 5 minutes. Bezos' lawyer immediately whispered something in his ear. For the first time, the billionaire looked genuinely concerned. During the brief pause, news of the explosive hearing had already begun spreading online. Tech reporters were live tweeting each revelation, and Amazon's stock had started to dip in real-time trading. The confrontation was about to reach its climax, and Wall Street was holding its breath. Crockett retrieved a sealed envelope from her aide. The room grew silent as she carefully opened it, the microphone picking up the sound of tearing paper in the hushed chamber. Bezos, what I'm about to share was provided by multiple whistleblowers from Amazon's tax strategy division and verified by independent experts. She removed a stack of documents, placing them carefully on the table before her. These are internal presentations and emails detailing what Amazon internally refers to as Project Bermuda Shield. Bezos' attorney immediately leaned over, whispering urgently in his ear. The Amazon founder's face remained impassive, but his knuckles whitened as he gripped the edge of the table. Crockett continued, her voice steady. For those unfamiliar, these documents outline Amazon's sophisticated tax avoidance system that has allowed the company to pay effectively zero federal corporate income tax in several profitable years. But what's truly concerning isn't just the tax avoidance. It's the deliberate strategy to mislead regulators about these practices. She displayed slides from an internal presentation on the large screen. Charts showed the complex web of subsidiaries and international money flows designed to minimize tax obligations. One slide was titled "Regulatory Blind Spots Maintaining the Shield." According to your own documents, Mr. Bezos, Amazon created artificial licensing arrangements between subsidiaries with the explicit goal of shifting profits to tax havens. This email from your chief financial officer specifically states that these arrangements had no legitimate business purpose other than tax benefits. Gasps echoed through the hearing room. Several committee members leaned forward, examining the documents more closely. Bezos finally spoke, his voice tighter than before. "Congresswoman, tax planning is complex, and Amazon complies with all laws in every jurisdiction where we operate. Without seeing these alleged documents in advance, I cannot address specific... Let me be clear about what's happening here." Mr. Bezos, Crockett interrupted, "I'm not describing aggressive but legal tax planning. These documents reveal knowing misrepresentations to the IRS and Treasury Department. Your teams internally called it regulatory arbitrage, but federal law has another term for it." She paused, letting the implications sink in. Several committee members exchanged glances. "But there's more," Crockett continued, pulling out another set of files. "While concerning tax avoidance affects government revenue, what I'm about to share affects every American consumer directly." She displayed a new set of documents on the screen. Project Harvest is the internal name for Amazon's consumer data collection and monetization program. According to these files, Amazon has been collecting significantly more data from consumers' devices than publicly acknowledged, including voice recordings from Alexa devices that weren't explicitly activated by wake words. The room erupted in commotion. The committee chairman banged his gavel repeatedly to restore order. "Furthermore," Crockett continued when the room quieted, "internal emails show that when engineers raised privacy concerns about these practices, they were told to maintain plausible deniability in public documentation." This email from a senior vice president specifically instructs team leads to compartmentalize knowledge about full data collection capabilities. Bezos's composed facade finally cracked. He conferred urgently with his legal team, then addressed the committee chair rather than Crockett. "Mr. Chairman, these allegations involve proprietary information that hasn't been provided to us in advance. We cannot respond meaningfully without proper review. I request a recess to consult with counsel." The chairman shook his head. "The committee's rules were followed, Mr. Bezos. All documents were properly submitted to the committee in advance. Congresswoman Crockett, please continue." Crockett nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman." "My final exhibit addresses Amazon's use of consumer data." She displayed a final set of documents that showed how Amazon's recommendation algorithms were designed to favor Amazon's own products and those from merchants who paid additional fees, despite public statements about neutral consumer growth recommendations. "Mr. Bezos, this internal strategy document titled Platform Advantage explicitly states that Amazon should leverage marketplace control to maximize revenue through preferential positioning while maintaining public messaging about neutrality. Would you like to explain this discrepancy?" The moment hung in the air. Bezos's expression was unreadable as he glanced at his attorneys. After what seemed like an eternity, he leaned into his microphone. "Congressman, I would need to review these specific documents more carefully before responding." Crockett nodded. "I understand. In fairness, there are hundreds of pages of evidence here. I've only highlighted a few key elements." She gathered her papers together. "Mr. Chairman, I move that all these documents be entered into the official record, and I yield back my time." The chairman nodded. "Without objection, the documents will be entered into the record." As Crockett sat back, the committee room remained unusually silent. In that moment, the power dynamic had irrevocably shifted. The woman from Texas who had been warned to back down had just delivered one of the most devastating congressional testimonies in decades. Outside the hearing room, news alerts were already blasting across screens nationwide. Amazon stock had dropped 9% and was still falling. Wall Street analysts were frantically updating their reports, and across social media, clips of Bezos's uncomfortable responses were spreading like wildfire. The digital evidence that Crockett had so carefully assembled and presented had accomplished what years of scattered criticism had not. It had penetrated Amazon's carefully constructed corporate armor and exposed the reality behind the retail giant's practices. For her part, Crockett showed no triumph, only resolve. The real work Reforming the system that allowed these practices to flourish was just beginning. Within hours of the hearing's conclusion, Crockett TV's Amazon and Bezos exposed were trending topics across all social media platforms. News networks scrambled to provide live coverage and analysis of what was quickly being called the most consequential congressional testimony since the tobacco hearings of the 1990s. Amazon stock continued its dramatic slide, closing down 17% for the day, wiping out over $200 billion, 0 cents in market value, in a single afternoon. The sell-off triggered broader concerns across tech stocks, with several major indices closing in negative territory. Financial analysts who had long championed Amazon as an unstoppable juggernaut were now scrambling to reassess their positions. CNBC's Jim Cramer, who had been bullish on Amazon for years, appeared visibly shaken on his evening broadcast. "What we saw today changes everything," he told viewers. The documents Congresswoman Crockett presented raised serious questions about Amazon's business practices, potential legal liabilities, and future regulatory environment. Investors need to recalibrate their expectations. By nightfall, Amazon had released a carefully worded statement. "We take the concerns raised in today's hearing seriously and are reviewing the matters discussed." Amazon has always strived to comply with all applicable laws and regulations while delivering value to customers, opportunities for sellers, and good jobs. "We will cooperate fully with any inquiries that result from today's proceeding." Behind the scenes, however, chaos reigned at Amazon headquarters. Emergency meetings of senior executives continued through the night. According to insiders who spoke on condition of anonymity, Bezos was furious about the internal documents that had made their way to Crockett's office. He reportedly ordered an immediate internal investigation to identify the whistleblowers. For Jasmine Crockett, the aftermath brought both acclaim and challenges. Conservative media outlets criticized her for attacking American innovation, while progressive voices hailed her as a champion willing to confront corporate power. Her office was flooded with calls from other potential whistleblowers, not just from Amazon, but from tech companies across Silicon Valley. The morning after the hearing, Crockett appeared on several news programs, maintaining her composed, matter-of-fact demeanor. "This isn't about attacking success or innovation," she explained on CNN. "It's about ensuring that even the most powerful companies play by the same rules as everyone else. No corporation should be above the law, no matter how convenient their services or how wealthy their founder." When asked about Bezos's veiled threat before the hearing, Crockett was direct. "I was elected to represent the people, not to bow to pressure from billionaires. If standing up for workers, consumers, and fair competition means facing corporate intimidation, then that's part of the job." The ripple effects spread quickly beyond Amazon. Other tech giants saw their stock prices tumble as investors worried about similar exposures. Calls for tech regulation grew louder in Washington, with several lawmakers from both parties announcing plans for new legislation addressing data privacy, antitrust concerns, and corporate tax reform. 3 days after the hearing, the Justice Department announced it was opening a formal investigation into Amazon, based on the evidence presented by Crockett. The Federal Trade Commission and IRS followed with their own inquiries. State attorneys general from 12 states announced a joint investigation into consumer protection violations. Within Amazon's workforce, the impact was profound. Warehouse workers, emboldened by the public exposure of internal safety documents, accelerated unionization efforts. Tech workers at Amazon's Seattle headquarters, many of whom had privately harbored concerns about company practices, began speaking more openly about ethical issues. 1 week after the hearing, a group of Amazon institutional investors filed a shareholder lawsuit against Bezos and the board of directors, claiming they had failed in their fiduciary duties by allowing practices that exposed the company to significant legal and regulatory risk. Wall Street analysts, who had long treated Amazon as nearly untouchable, began issuing more cautious assessments. Morgan Stanley downgraded the stock, citing unprecedented regulatory uncertainty and potential for significant financial penalties. Goldman Sachs estimated potential regulatory fines could exceed $10 billion, 0 cents, with additional costs from required operational changes. For consumers, the revelations about data collection practices led to a significant increase in people reviewing their privacy settings, deleting Alexa voice history, and in some cases, canceling Amazon Prime memberships. Several privacy advocacy groups launched campaigns to help consumers understand and limit the data collected about them. The business world watched closely as competing retailers like Walmart and Target saw opportunity in Amazon's troubles, launching new initiatives to attract both consumers and third-party sellers who had grown wary of Amazon's marketplace dominance. 2 weeks after the hearing, Jeff Bezos announced he would step back from day-to-day involvement with Amazon to focus on addressing the concerns raised and ensuring Amazon's compliance with all legal and ethical standards. Industry insiders interpreted this as a tactical retreat aimed at insulating the company from his now controversial leadership. The international implications were equally significant. The European Union's competition commissioner announced accelerated investigations into Amazon's practices in European markets. Several countries, including France and Germany, began exploring digital service taxes specifically aimed at large tech platforms operating in their territories. Perhaps most significantly, Crockett's exposure of Amazon's practices sparked a broader conversation about corporate power in America. Editorial boards across the political spectrum published pieces questioning whether regulations had failed to keep pace with the rise of digital monopolies. Even business-friendly publications acknowledged that some form of increased oversight seemed inevitable. 3 months after the hearing, Congress passed the Digital Markets Accountability Act with surprising bipartisan support. The legislation strengthened antitrust enforcement, limited data collection practices, and required greater transparency from dominant online platforms. Though technology companies lobbied aggressively against it, the public sentiment had shifted too dramatically to stop its passage. For Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, the Amazon hearing became defining, but not defining. She continued her work on a range of issues affecting her constituents, from healthcare to voting rights. When asked if she felt vindicated by the subsequent investigations and legislation, she typically responded, "This was never about one hearing or one company. It's about whether we have the courage to ensure that our economy works for everyone, not just the wealthy and powerful." 1 year after the hearing, with Amazon operating under a consent decree with federal regulators and implementing significant changes to its business practices, Crockett reflected on the experience in a rare personal interview. "There was certainly pressure to back down," she acknowledged. "But throughout history, progress has always required people willing to stand up to power, especially when it seems intimidating." The most lasting legacy of the confrontation between Bezos and Crockett wasn't just the regulatory changes or stock market fluctuations. It was the reminder that in a democracy, even the most powerful corporations remain accountable to the public interest. And sometimes it takes just one determined person with the right evidence to change the course of corporate history. Amazon eventually recovered, though it emerged as a different company, more transparent, more cautious, and more cognizant of its social responsibilities. Jeff Bezos, while still enormously wealthy, saw his public image permanently altered. He became more focused on his space exploration ventures, perhaps seeking to rebuild his legacy beyond the controversies that had tarnished his reputation. As for the whistleblowers who had risked their careers to provide Crockett with the critical evidence, most remained anonymous. But their collective action had demonstrated the power of individual conscience in the face of institutional wrongdoing. Their courage inspired others across the corporate world to come forward with evidence of misconduct, triggering a wave of corporate accountability that extended far beyond Amazon. In congressional offices throughout Washington, staffers began referring to thoroughly researched, evidence-based confrontations with powerful interests as pulling a Crockett. It became shorthand for the kind of methodical, fact-driven oversight that could cut through spin and public relations to expose the truth. The confrontation between Jeff Bezos and Jasmine Crockett ultimately became more than a viral political moment or a stock market disruption. It became a case study in how democratic institutions, when functioning as intended, can hold even the most powerful accountable. And it served as a reminder that beneath the polished exteriors of corporate giants, there often lies a more complicated and sometimes troubling reality waiting to be exposed. If you found this story of corporate accountability fascinating, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. We bring you the most explosive political confrontations and behind-the-scenes insights that the mainstream media won't show. Hit that notification bell so you'll be the first to know when we post our next video exposing the powerful figures trying to avoid accountability. Comment below with which corporate giant you think should face congressional questioning next.